Welcome to Night Shift Cozy, where gentle stories carry you softly into the most peaceful sleep. I'm so grateful you've chosen to spend these quiet evening moments with me tonight. There's something truly magical about this time of year, isn't there? The way the world seems to slow down just a little, wrapped in twinkling lights and the promise of wonder. Tonight, we're going to drift together through some of the most soothing Christmas stories ever told. Stories designed to ease your mind and help you slip into the deepest, most restorative sleep. As you settle in wherever you are right now, I want you to imagine that you're being tucked into the coziest possible place. Maybe you're beneath layers of soft blankets, or perhaps you're listening while snow falls gently outside your window. Whatever your surroundings, know that you're exactly where you need to be. Tonight's stories will wrap around you like the warmest winter scarf, carrying you to places where time moves slowly and every detail is painted in shades of comfort and peace. The stories we'll share tonight are different from the Christmas tales you might remember from childhood. These aren't stories of adventure or excitement, but rather gentle journeys through quiet moments and tender scenes. We'll visit a small village bakery where the scent of cinnamon and vanilla drifts through frosted windows. We'll spend time with a grandmother preparing special holiday treats while sharing memories with her granddaughter. We'll wander through snow-covered gardens where every footstep creates its own whispered lullaby. Each story has been carefully crafted to help your mind release the tensions of the day. There are no surprises waiting around any corners, no problems that need solving, no urgency of any kind. Instead, there are warm kitchens filled with the gentle sounds of preparation, cozy rooms lit by the soft glow of Christmas trees, and characters who move through their worlds with intention and grace. These are stories where the most exciting moment might be the perfect golden brown color of freshly baked cookies, or the way candlelight flickers against frost-covered glass. You don't need to follow every word or remember every detail. In fact, I encourage you to let your attention drift wherever it wants to go. Sometimes you might find yourself focused on the rhythm of my voice, other times on the images the words create in your mind. There's no right or wrong way to listen. Your only job tonight is to allow yourself to be carried along by these gentle narratives, letting them guide you toward the rest your body and mind are craving. Let's begin our first story in a place where time seems to move, like honey on a cold morning. Picture a small village nestled in a valley where houses cluster together like old friends sharing secrets. The streets are narrow and winding, paved with stones that have been worn smooth by countless footsteps over many generations. Tonight, a light snow is falling, not the heavy kind that might cause concern, but the gentle dancing flakes that seem to float rather than fall. In this village stands a little shop with windows that glow warmly against the winter evening. The sign above the door reads "Evergreen Treasures" in elegant script, and displayed in those welcoming windows are the most beautiful Christmas ornaments you've ever seen. Each one has been carefully placed to catch the light just so, creating tiny rainbows that dance across the glass. There are delicate glass baubles in shades of deep red and forest green, wooden angels with wings that seem to shimmer in the lamplight, and tiny villages made of the finest porcelain, complete with miniature snow-covered roofs and windows that glow as if lit from within. The shop belongs to Eleanor, a woman in her 70s whose hands have spent decades creating beauty from simple materials. Her workshop occupies the back room of the store, where she can often be found carefully painting delicate details onto ornaments or threading silver wire through tiny beads to create the most intricate garlands. This evening, as the snow continues its gentle descent outside, Eleanor is putting the finishing touches on a very special collection of ornaments that she creates only once each year. These ornaments are different from the others in her shop. Each one tells a story of the village itself, capturing moments and memories that the residents hold dear. There's one that depicts the old stone bridge, where couples have been getting engaged for over a century. Another shows the village square during the annual Christmas market, with tiny figures browsing among miniature stalls laden with impossibly small goods. Each ornament is a masterpiece of patience and care, requiring hours of detailed work that Eleanor approaches with the same gentle attention she might give to tending a garden. Tonight, Eleanor works by the light of a single lamp, its warm glow creating a circle of comfort in the quiet workshop. The rest of the room fades into soft shadows, filled with shelves of supplies and works in progress. She's been working on a particularly special ornament for several weeks now, one that captures the view from her own window during last year's Christmas Eve snowfall. The scene shows the village church with its tall spire reaching toward a star-filled sky, surrounded by houses with windows glowing like tiny beacons of warmth and welcome. As Eleanor works, she can hear the gentle sounds of the village settling into evening around her. The soft chiming of the church bell marking the hour, the distant sound of someone closing shutters for the night, the whisper of snow against her own windows. These sounds have been the soundtrack to her life for so many years that they've become like old friends, reliable and comforting in their familiarity. Her fingers move with practiced precision as she adds the final details to the ornament. A tiny brush loaded with the palest yellow paint creates the suggestion of candlelight in each miniature window. A small detail that would be barely visible to most observers, but Eleanor knows that these small touches are what transform a simple decoration into something that carries genuine magic. She's learned over the years that the most beautiful things are often created not through grand gestures, but through countless small acts of attention and care. The ornament is nearly complete now, needing only the delicate silver cap that will allow it to hang from a Christmas tree branch. Eleanor reaches for one of the caps from a small wooden box on her workbench, each one polished to a soft shine that catches the lamplight. As she carefully attaches it to the ornament, she thinks about the family who commissioned this piece, the Hendersons, who moved to the village just 3 years ago, but have already become such an important part of the community. They had come to her shop in early November, the whole family together, looking for something special to commemorate their first Christmas in what they now considered their true home. Eleanor had listened as they described how the village had welcomed them, how neighbors had become friends, how they had found in this small place something they hadn't even realized they were searching for. She had known immediately what kind of ornament would capture that feeling, and she had begun work on it that very week. Now, as she holds the finished piece up to the light, Eleanor feels that familiar satisfaction that comes from creating something beautiful and meaningful. The ornament catches the lamplight and seems to glow from within, just as the real village glows with the warmth of its people and their connections to one another. Tomorrow, she will wrap it carefully in tissue paper and present it to the Henderson family, knowing that it will find its place of honor on their Christmas tree and become part of their family's story for years to come. Outside, the snow continues to fall in that gentle, unhurried way that transforms the world into something soft and dreamlike. The village streets are empty now, except for the occasional cat making its way home, leaving tiny paw prints in the fresh snow that will be covered by morning. The warm lights in house windows create golden rectangles against the white landscape, each one a promise of comfort and safety within. Eleanor sets down her brush and stretches her hands, feeling the pleasant fatigue that comes from hours of detailed work. She looks around her workshop with satisfaction, seeing the collection of completed ornaments that will soon make their way to homes throughout the village and beyond. Each one carries with it her hopes for the families who will receive them, her wish that these small tokens of beauty might add something special to their holiday celebrations. She glances at the small clock on her workbench and notices that the evening has grown later than she realized. Time has a way of slipping by when you're absorbed in work you love, and Eleanor has always found that her most peaceful hours are spent here in this quiet space, surrounded by the tools of her craft. The gentle tick of the clock blends with the soft whisper of wind against the windows, creating a rhythm that feels like the heartbeat of the village itself. Before closing up for the evening, Eleanor decides to make herself a cup of tea. She moves slowly through her workshop, switching off the work lamp and gathering the small brushes that need cleaning. Each movement is deliberate and unhurried, part of an evening ritual she's followed for years. In the tiny kitchen at the back of her shop, she fills an old copper kettle with water and sets it on the small stove. While waiting for the water to heat, she selects her favorite mug, a hand-thrown piece glazed in deep blue that was a gift from her daughter many years ago. The kettle begins its gentle whistle, and Eleanor prepares her tea with the same careful attention she gives to her ornament work. She chooses chamomile tonight, a blend that always helps her transition from the focused energy of creation to the peaceful quiet of evening. As the tea steeps, she wraps herself in a soft wool shawl that hangs by the kitchen door and steps to the window that looks out over the village square. From this vantage point, she can see the Christmas tree that was erected just last week in the center of the square. It's a magnificent pine donated by the Morrison family from their farm just outside town, and it stands nearly 20 feet tall. Tomorrow, the village will gather for the annual tree lighting ceremony, and Eleanor's heart warms as she imagines the scene. Children will run between the adults, their cheeks pink from the cold, while someone plays carols on the old accordion that appears every year for just this purpose. Eleanor returns to her tea, cradling the warm mug in both hands as she settles into the comfortable chair by her window. This is her favorite time of day, when the work is done and the world outside grows quiet. The snow continues its gentle fall, and she watches as each flake catches briefly in the glow of the street lamps before disappearing into the white blanket that covers everything. There's something hypnotic about watching snow fall, the way it transforms the familiar into something magical and new. As she sips her tea, Eleanor's thoughts drift to the Christmas morning that awaits just 2 weeks away. She imagines families throughout the village waking to find snow outside their windows, children discovering gifts beneath Christmas trees, and her own ornaments hanging among the branches, each one a small part of someone's holiday joy. It's a thought that fills her with deep satisfaction, knowing that her work contributes to the happiness and traditions of so many families. The chamomile tea works its gentle magic, and Eleanor feels the pleasant drowsiness that signals the day's end approaching. She finishes her tea slowly, savoring both the warmth and the quiet moments of reflection. When the mug is empty, she rises and washes it carefully, placing it in the wooden dish rack to dry overnight. These simple domestic rituals ground her, connecting her to generations of women who have performed these same small acts of care at the end of their days. Eleanor makes one final tour of her shop, checking that everything is secure for the night. She adjusts a few ornaments in the window display, ensuring they'll catch the morning light beautifully for tomorrow's early customers. The cash register is counted and closed. The front door is locked, and the security system is set with practiced efficiency. As she climbs the narrow stairs to her apartment above the shop, Eleanor feels that deep satisfaction that comes from a day well spent in meaningful work. Her apartment is small, but perfectly appointed for a woman who appreciates beauty in simple things. The living room centers around a fireplace where a few glowing coals still provide gentle warmth. Bookshelves line the walls, filled with volumes on art history, craft techniques, and well-worn novels that she returns to like old friends. A small Christmas tree sits in the corner, decorated entirely with ornaments from her early years of learning the craft, each one a memory of her journey toward mastery. Eleanor prepares for bed with the same unhurried grace that characterizes all her movements. She brushes her silver hair slowly, counting the strokes as her mother taught her to do decades ago. The familiar routine is soothing, connecting her to memories of childhood bedtimes when the world felt safe and predictable. She changes into a soft cotton nightgown and adds an extra blanket to her bed, knowing that the temperature will drop further during the night. Before settling into sleep, Eleanor takes a moment to look out her bedroom window at the village below. Most houses are dark now, their residents already deep in peaceful slumber. Only the street lamps remain to mark the familiar streets and squares, creating pools of warm light in the snowy landscape. A few windows still glow softly, suggesting someone else enjoying these quiet evening hours, perhaps reading by lamplight or sharing a late cup of tea with a loved one. As Eleanor settles beneath her quilts, she feels grateful for this life she's built, surrounded by beauty and purpose in a community that values both tradition and craftsmanship. Tomorrow will bring new customers to her shop, new stories to capture in glass and paint, new opportunities to create small moments of magic for families she may never meet, but whose lives her work will touch. It's a legacy built not in grand gestures, but in countless small acts of creation and care. The snow continues to fall outside her window, muffling the world in soft silence. Eleanor's breathing deepens and slows, following the rhythm of sleep that has carried her through thousands of peaceful nights in this place she calls home. Her last conscious thought is of the Henderson family's ornament, wrapped safely in tissue paper and waiting to become part of their Christmas story, a small bridge between the artist's heart and the joy it will bring to theirs. Let's drift now from Eleanor's peaceful village to another scene of quiet Christmas preparation. Picture a farmhouse kitchen where steam rises gently from a large pot simmering on an old wood-burning stove. The kitchen belongs to Margaret, a grandmother whose holiday traditions have been passed down through 4 generations of women in her family. Tonight, she's preparing for tomorrow's arrival of her daughter and grandchildren who come every year for the week leading up to Christmas. The farmhouse sits on rolling hills, about an hour's drive from the nearest town, surrounded by fields that now sleep beneath layers of pristine snow. The house itself is over a century old, built by Margaret's husband's grandfather with timber cut from the very land where it stands. Over the decades, each generation has added their own touches while preserving the essential character of the place. The kitchen, in particular, remains largely unchanged, with its deep farmhouse sink, open shelving displaying well-used pottery, and the massive table that has hosted countless family meals. Margaret moves through this familiar space with the confidence of someone who knows every corner, every drawer, every quirk of the old appliances. She's spent the afternoon preparing ingredients for tomorrow's baking marathon, a tradition that fills the house with warmth and wonderful aromas for days. Flour sits measured in large bowls, covered with clean kitchen towels. Butter waits at room temperature, ready to be creamed with sugar. Spices have been checked and arranged in the order they'll be needed. The pot on the stove contains her grandmother's recipe for mulled cider, a blend of apple cider, cinnamon sticks, whole cloves, and orange peel that will greet her family when they arrive tomorrow afternoon. The recipe has never been written down, passed instead through demonstration and taste, adjusted slightly by each generation to suit their family's preferences. Margaret learned it by standing at her own grandmother's elbow, watching the careful addition of each spice, learning to judge the perfect balance by scent and color. As the cider simmers, filling the kitchen with its spiced fragrance, Margaret checks on the bread dough that's been rising on the warming shelf above the stove. This too is a family recipe for a rich egg bread that will be shaped into wreaths and braids tomorrow morning. The dough has doubled in size and feels perfect beneath her experienced fingers, smooth and elastic with just the right amount of give. She covers it again and sets it in the cool pantry, where it will continue its slow rise overnight. Margaret's granddaughter, Emma, who is 8 years old, has become her eager apprentice in recent years. Last Christmas, Emma stood on a sturdy wooden stool beside the kitchen counter, carefully measuring ingredients while Margaret guided her small hands. This year, Emma has asked to learn how to make the sugar cookies that have been shaped and decorated by their family for over 50 years. Margaret has already prepared the cookie dough and stored it in the refrigerator, where it will chill overnight and be ready for rolling first thing in the morning. The cookie cutters wait in their traditional tin, shapes that tell the story of Christmases past. There's the star that belonged to Margaret's mother, slightly bent from decades of use, but still perfectly functional. The Christmas tree cutter that her husband carved from wood during the early years of their marriage. The angel that Emma's mother chose when she was about Emma's age, insisting it was the most beautiful shape she'd ever seen. Each cutter carries memories of small hands learning to press firmly through dough, of flour-dusted counters, and the sweet anticipation of decorated cookies cooling on wire racks. Margaret pauses in her preparations to step onto the back porch, breathing deeply of the cold, clean air. The night is perfectly still, except for the distant sound of wind moving through the bare branches of the oak trees that line the lane leading to the main road. Snow covers everything in smooth, unbroken curves, transforming the familiar landscape into something ethereal and magical. The barn stands solid and reassuring in the distance, its weathered wood silvered by moonlight, while the chicken coop nearby shows warm yellow light from the heat lamp that keeps her small flock comfortable through the winter nights. This land has been in her husband's family for 3 generations, and Margaret feels the weight of that continuity as she looks out over the snowy fields. Her children learned to walk on these wide plank floors, learned to bake in this very kitchen, learned the rhythms of rural life through countless seasons of planting and harvest, snow and spring rain. Now her grandchildren are creating their own memories here, building connections to place and tradition that will anchor them throughout their lives. Returning to the warmth of her kitchen, Margaret feels the gentle tiredness that comes from a day of purposeful preparation. The mulled cider continues its quiet bubbling, and she stirs it once more before reducing the heat to its lowest setting. The scent has deepened now, rich with cinnamon and clove, exactly as it should be. She tastes it carefully, using the same wooden spoon her grandmother used, and nods with satisfaction. Tomorrow, when her family arrives with cold cheeks and bright eyes, this will be the first thing to greet them, warming them from the inside out. The farmhouse settles around her with the small sounds that old houses make as they adjust to the cooling night air. Wooden beams creak softly overhead, and the wind stirs gently against the windows. These sounds have been Margaret's companions for 43 years of marriage, and now, in the 5 years since her husband passed, they've become even more precious. The house remembers all the Christmases it has sheltered, all the laughter and conversations, all the quiet moments like this one, when preparation transforms into anticipation. Margaret moves to the large pine table that dominates the center of the kitchen and begins laying out the ingredients she'll need for tomorrow's first baking session. Each bowl and measuring cup has its place in the familiar choreography of holiday preparation. She arranges everything with the same care she might use to set a formal dinner table, understanding that the process itself is as important as the final result. There's something meditative about these preparations, the way they connect her to decades of similar evenings when she stood in this same spot, planning for the arrival of loved ones. The sugar for the cookies sits in a large ceramic bowl, white crystals catching the overhead light like tiny pieces of snow. Beside it, she places the bottle of pure vanilla extract, dark amber in its small glass container. The vanilla was a gift from her daughter-in-law, who grows her own vanilla beans and makes the extract herself. It's stronger and more complex than anything from the store, with layers of flavor that will make even the simplest cookies taste extraordinary. Margaret opens the bottle briefly, breathing in the sweet, complex aroma that will soon fill her kitchen. Next, she checks the eggs, selecting the largest and freshest from the basket that sits on her counter. These come from her own hens, birds she knows by name and temperament. The eggs have deep golden yolks that will give her cookies a rich color and tender texture impossible to achieve with store-bought alternatives. She sets aside 6 eggs, knowing from experience exactly how many the cookie recipe will require, plus 1 extra in case of mishaps. As Margaret continues her preparations, she finds herself thinking about Emma's eager questions during their phone call last week. Her granddaughter wanted to know everything about the cookie decorating process, from how to make the perfect royal icing to the techniques for creating smooth, even coverage. Margaret had laughed, remembering her own impatience at that age, the way she'd wanted to rush through the careful steps to get to the magical moment when plain cookies became works of art. She moves to the pantry and retrieves the food coloring she bought specially for this year's decorating session. The small bottles contain every color imaginable, from traditional Christmas red and green to softer pastels that Emma particularly loves. Last year, Emma had created cookies in shades of lavender and pale yellow, explaining seriously that angels probably wore all different colors, not just white and gold. Margaret had agreed wholeheartedly, charmed by her granddaughter's creative interpretation of tradition. The icing sugar waits in its own container, fine as powder and bright white. Margaret has learned over the years to sift it twice, ensuring that no lumps will mar the smooth surface of the finished icing. Tomorrow, she and Emma will stand side by side at this counter, mixing colors and testing consistency. Emma's small fingers learning to pipe delicate borders around star-shaped cookies. The process requires patience, but Margaret has discovered that some of her most treasured conversations with her granddaughter happen during these quiet moments of shared concentration. Outside, the snow continues to fall in large, lazy flakes that drift past the kitchen windows like feathers on a gentle breeze. The yard light illuminates a perfect circle of the falling snow, creating a magical snow globe effect that never fails to captivate Margaret. She pauses in her work to watch for a moment, remembering how her own children used to press their faces against these same windows, mesmerized by the dancing snowflakes. Now Emma does the same thing, her breath fogging the glass as she counts the flakes that land on the windowsill. Margaret returns to her preparations, measuring out the flour for tomorrow's cookie rolling. She uses a large ceramic canister that belonged to her mother-in-law, decorated with hand-painted roses that have faded slightly over the decades, but remain beautiful. The flour is soft and fine, perfect for creating tender cookies that won't be tough even after being rolled and cut multiple times. She's learned to add just a touch more flour than the recipe calls for, accounting for the humidity that the simmering cider adds to the kitchen air. The butter for tomorrow's baking sits in neat sticks on a plate, slowly coming to room temperature. Margaret has always preferred real butter to any substitute, believing that the richness and flavor it provides are worth the extra expense. Tomorrow morning, she'll cream this butter with sugar until the mixture is light and fluffy, incorporating tiny air bubbles that will make the finished cookies tender and delicate. It's a process that can't be rushed, requiring patience and the right temperature to achieve perfection. As she works, Margaret finds herself humming an old carol, one her mother used to sing while baking. The melody comes naturally, as familiar as breathing, and she realizes that she's probably hummed the same song in the same kitchen hundreds of times over the years. Music has always been part of her baking process, whether it's carols during the holidays or folk songs during summer preserving sessions. There's something about the rhythm of familiar melodies that helps her hands find their perfect pace. She checks the clock and realizes that the evening has grown later than she intended. Tomorrow will begin early, with the arrival of her family in the late afternoon and a full day of baking before then. But Margaret has never been one to rush through these preparatory rituals. She's learned that the care taken in preparation shows in the final result, whether it's cookies that hold their shape perfectly or icing that dries to a smooth, professional finish. Margaret decides to make herself a cup of tea before heading upstairs for the night. She chooses a chamomile blend, something gentle that will help her transition from the focused energy of preparation to the peaceful quiet needed for good sleep. While the water heats in her old copper kettle, she takes one final look around the kitchen, ensuring that everything is ready for tomorrow's activities. The sight of the organized ingredients and prepared workspace fills her with satisfaction and anticipation. The kettle begins its gentle whistle, and Margaret prepares her tea in a delicate china cup, one from a set that was a wedding gift 43 years ago. The chamomile steeps slowly, releasing its subtle honey-like fragrance into the warm kitchen air. She adds just a touch of local honey, stirred in with a small silver spoon that belonged to her grandmother. These small rituals of evening tea have become even more precious since her husband's passing, moments of quiet reflection that anchor her days. Carrying her tea to the kitchen table, Margaret settles into the chair where she's sat for countless evening conversations over the years. From this spot, she can see out into the snowy yard, where the security light creates a warm pool of illumination against the white landscape. The barn stands solid and reassuring in the distance, and she can just make out the shapes of her fruit trees, their bare branches etched delicately against the snowy sky. As she sips her tea, Margaret thinks about the week ahead. Tomorrow will bring the joyful chaos of her family's arrival, followed by days of baking, decorating, storytelling, and the 1,000 small traditions that make their Christmas celebrations special. Emma will stand on her wooden stool, carefully spooning cookie dough onto parchment-lined baking sheets. Her son will build fires in both fireplaces, filling the house with the scent of burning applewood. Her daughter will take over the kitchen for one evening, preparing the elaborate Christmas Eve dinner that has become her specialty. The tea works its gentle magic, and Margaret feels the pleasant drowsiness that signals the day's end approaching. She finishes her tea slowly, savoring the quiet moments and the anticipation of tomorrow's activities. When the cup is empty, she rises and washes it carefully in the deep farmhouse sink, placing it in the wooden dish rack to dry overnight. The familiar sound of water running and dishes clinking provides a soothing soundtrack to these evening rituals. Margaret turns off the heat under the mulled cider, covering the pot with a heavy lid to keep the spiced mixture warm and fragrant for tomorrow. She checks that the bread dough is properly covered in the cool pantry and gives the kitchen one final survey to ensure that everything is ready for the morning's baking session. The ingredients stand ready, the workspace is prepared, and tomorrow will begin with the wonderful aromas of fresh bread and cookies filling the old farmhouse. Before heading upstairs, Margaret steps once more onto the back porch, breathing deeply of the cold, clean air. The snow has stopped falling, leaving the world wrapped in pristine white silence. Stars are beginning to appear between the clouds, tiny points of light in the vast winter sky. The sight fills her with that particular peace that comes from being exactly where you belong, surrounded by the landscape and traditions that have shaped your life. Climbing the familiar stairs to her bedroom, Margaret feels the deep satisfaction that comes from a day of purposeful preparation. The old wooden steps creak softly under her feet, the same sounds her children heard when they climbed these stairs as youngsters, excited about the next day's activities. Her bedroom waits at the end of the hall, cozy and warm, with quilts her grandmother made and windows that look out over the snowy fields where her grandchildren will play tomorrow. As Margaret prepares for bed, she thinks about Emma's excitement during their last phone call, the way her granddaughter's voice rose with anticipation when discussing the cookie decorating plans. There's something magical about seeing Christmas through a child's eyes, the way simple activities become adventures and ordinary moments transform into treasured memories. Tomorrow, Margaret will have the privilege of creating those moments with Emma, passing on traditions while making new memories together. The farmhouse settles into peaceful silence around her as Margaret slips beneath her quilts. Outside her window, the snowy landscape stretches away into darkness, broken only by the occasional light from a distant neighbor's house. The familiar sounds of the old house adjusting to the night temperatures create a gentle lullaby, the same sounds that have comforted her through thousands of winter nights in this place she's called home for nearly half a century. Her last thoughts before sleep are of tomorrow's joyful reunion, of small hands learning to shape cookie dough and bright eyes watching cookies transform in the oven's heat. The kitchen will fill with laughter and the sweet aromas of holiday baking, creating new layers of memory in a house already rich with the stories of Christmases past. In just a few hours, the cycle will begin again, connecting past and present through the simple acts of preparation, creation, and love that define the best of family traditions. Sleep comes easily to Margaret in her peaceful farmhouse, carried by the gentle sounds of winter wind and the warm knowledge that tomorrow will bring her family home for another Christmas season filled with tradition, laughter, and the sweet satisfaction of homemade gifts from her heart and kitchen. Our next gentle journey takes us to a small coastal town where the sound of waves provides a constant, soothing rhythm to daily life. The town sits nestled between rolling hills and a protected harbor where fishing boats bob gently at their moorings, even on the windiest days. Tonight, we'll spend time with Thomas, the keeper of the town's lighthouse, as he prepares for Christmas Eve in his own quiet, meaningful way. The lighthouse stands at the end of a rocky point that extends into the sea like a protective arm around the harbor. Built over 100 years ago from local granite, its white tower rises majestically against the winter sky, crowned with the glass lantern room where Thomas tends the beacon that guides vessels safely home. The lighthouse keeper's quarters are built into the base of the tower, creating a cozy home with thick stone walls that keep the interior warm and peaceful regardless of the weather outside. Thomas has been the lighthouse keeper for nearly 20 years now, following in the footsteps of his father and grandfather before him. The tradition of lighthouse keeping runs deep in his family, passed down through generations who understood the sacred responsibility of maintaining the beacon that keeps mariners safe. Even though modern navigation systems have reduced the lighthouse's critical importance, the town council and maritime authorities have chosen to keep it operational, recognizing its value both as a historical landmark and a symbol of safety for local fishermen. This Christmas Eve morning, Thomas begins his day as he always does, climbing the spiral staircase that winds up through the center of the lighthouse tower. The stairs are worn smooth by decades of footsteps, each step echoing softly in the circular chamber. As he climbs, Thomas counts the steps automatically, a habit developed over years of making this journey multiple times each day. When 112 steps from the base to the lantern room, each one bringing him closer to his daily ritual of checking and maintaining the light. The lantern room at the top of the tower offers a 360-degree view of the surrounding landscape. On clear days like today, Thomas can see for miles in every direction. To the east, the ocean stretches endlessly toward the horizon, its surface this morning painted in shades of deep blue and silver. To the west, the town spreads out below him like a living map, with smoke rising from chimneys and the first stirrings of daily activity visible in the streets. The harbor directly below shows fishing boats preparing for their morning departure, their crews moving purposefully about their decks. Thomas begins his morning inspection of the lighthouse beacon, checking each component with the methodical care his father taught him. The massive lens system, called a Fresnel lens, consists of hundreds of individual glass elements arranged in concentric rings. Each piece must be spotlessly clean to ensure maximum light output, and Thomas takes pride in maintaining the lens to museum quality standards. This morning, he notices a few spots where sea spray has left salt residue, and he carefully cleans each affected section with distilled water and soft cloth. The lighthouse beacon operates automatically now, controlled by sensors that detect approaching darkness and switch the light on without human intervention. But Thomas still performs the daily maintenance routines that keep the system operating reliably. He checks the backup power systems, tests the rotation mechanism that sweeps the beam across the water, and verifies that the emergency radio equipment is functioning properly. These tasks connect him to generations of lighthouse keepers who performed similar duties, maintaining the unbroken chain of vigilance that has protected mariners for over a century. After completing his technical duties, Thomas allows himself a few minutes to simply stand in the lantern room and enjoy the view. This is his favorite time of day, when the morning light reveals the world in fresh detail and the day's possibilities stretch out before him like the ocean itself. He watches as the fishing boats clear the harbor mouth and head toward their chosen waters, their wakes creating expanding V-shapes on the calm surface. Each boat represents families who depend on the sea for their livelihood, and Thomas feels the weight of responsibility that comes with maintaining the beacon that helps guide them safely home each evening. Descending the lighthouse stairs, Thomas returns to his living quarters to prepare breakfast. The lighthouse keeper's residence occupies 3 levels of the tower's base, with a kitchen and living area on the ground floor, a bedroom and study on the second level, and storage areas built into the thick stone walls. The kitchen is compact but well appointed, with windows that look out over the harbor and provide natural light throughout the day. Thomas has lived alone since his wife passed 3 years ago, but he's found comfort in the routines and responsibilities of lighthouse keeping. This morning, Thomas prepares a simple breakfast of scrambled eggs and toast, using eggs from the chickens he keeps in a small coop behind the lighthouse. The hens are hardy breeds chosen for their ability to thrive in the coastal environment, and they provide him with fresh eggs year-round. As he cooks, Thomas listens to the marine radio, monitoring the chatter between fishing boats and the Coast Guard. This constant background of maritime communication keeps him connected to the working life of the harbor, even during the quiet hours when he's alone in the lighthouse. While eating breakfast at his small kitchen table, Thomas reviews his plans for Christmas Eve day. Unlike most people, he can't leave his post for extended periods, as someone must always be available to respond to maritime emergencies. But over the years, he's developed his own Christmas traditions that bring meaning and joy to the holiday season. This afternoon, he'll begin his annual project of creating handmade Christmas cards for every family in the town, each one featuring a different watercolor painting of the lighthouse and harbor. Thomas discovered his talent for watercolor painting quite by accident several years ago, when he began sketching the views from the lighthouse as a way to pass time during quiet winter days. What started as simple pencil drawings gradually evolved into detailed paintings as he experimented with different techniques and materials. Now his walls are covered with framed watercolors depicting the lighthouse and surrounding landscape through all seasons and weather conditions. The paintings capture not just the visual beauty of the place, but something deeper about the relationship between land, sea, and sky. For his Christmas cards, Thomas chooses scenes that highlight the peaceful, protective nature of the lighthouse. One card might show the beacon's warm light cutting through morning fog, while another depicts the lighthouse standing serene against a sunset sky painted in shades of rose and gold. Each painting is small enough to fit on a card, but detailed enough to serve as a miniature work of art. Thomas takes particular care with the lighting effects, understanding from his daily experience how light behaves in this coastal environment. The process of creating the Christmas cards begins in his study, a cozy room lined with bookshelves and warmed by a small wood-burning stove. Thomas has converted one corner into an art studio, with a drafting table positioned to catch the best natural light from the north-facing window. His art supplies are organized meticulously, with watercolor paints arranged by color family and brushes sorted by size and type. The setup allows him to work efficiently while maintaining the quality standards he's set for himself. Thomas begins each painting by sketching the basic composition in light pencil, establishing the proportions and major elements before adding any color. His years of observing the lighthouse and harbor from every angle have given him an intuitive understanding of perspective and proportion, allowing him to capture the essence of familiar scenes without needing to work from reference photographs. The sketching process is meditative, requiring just enough concentration to quiet his mind while leaving space for creativity to emerge. Once the pencil sketch is complete, Thomas begins applying watercolor washes, starting with the lightest tones and gradually building up layers of color and detail. Watercolor painting requires patience and careful planning, as mistakes can't easily be corrected. But Thomas has learned to embrace the medium's unpredictable nature, finding that happy accidents often create effects more beautiful than anything he could have planned. The transparency of watercolor paint allows him to capture the luminous quality of coastal light, the way it seems to glow from within clouds and water. Today's first painting depicts the lighthouse on a snowy Christmas morning with the beacon glowing warmly against a pale winter sky. Thomas mixes a delicate wash of blue and gray for the sky, adding just a touch of yellow near the horizon to suggest the weak winter sun. The snow on the lighthouse and surrounding rocks is rendered in pure white paper, with subtle shadows painted in the palest blue-violet. The beacon itself requires careful attention, as Thomas wants to capture the way electric light appears to radiate outward, creating a gentle glow in the surrounding air. As he works, Thomas finds himself thinking about the families who will receive these cards, people he's known for years through their connections to the harbor and the sea. There's Mrs. Chen, whose husband was a fisherman for 40 years before retiring to tend a small garden overlooking the water. The Morrison family, whose teenage son helps Thomas with lighthouse maintenance during summer vacations. Captain Rodriguez, who operates the harbor tour boat and always waves to Thomas when passing the lighthouse. Each card will be addressed personally with a handwritten note expressing Thomas's gratitude for their friendship and support. The watercolor painting progresses slowly, with Thomas pausing frequently to allow each layer of paint to dry completely before adding the next. This natural rhythm prevents him from rushing the work and gives him time to consider each decision carefully. He's learned that the most successful paintings often come from this patient, methodical approach, building up complexity gradually rather than trying to capture everything at once. The forced pauses also allow him to step back and see the painting with fresh eyes, catching potential problems before they become irreversible. By late morning, the first Christmas card painting is nearly complete, needing only a few final details to capture the festive atmosphere Thomas envisions. He adds tiny touches of warm yellow to suggested lights in the lighthouse windows, creating the impression of a cozy home glowing from within. Small footprints in the snow leading to the lighthouse door hint at visitors arriving for Christmas celebrations. The subtle narrative elements transform the painting from a simple landscape into a story about warmth, welcome, and the enduring human connections that make any place truly home. While the completed painting dries, Thomas prepares materials for the next card in his series. He's planned 12 different designs, each showcasing a different aspect of the lighthouse's relationship with its surroundings. The second painting will show the lighthouse at sunset on Christmas Eve, with fishing boats returning to harbor beneath a sky painted in dramatic shades of orange and purple. Thomas particularly enjoys painting these twilight scenes, as they allow him to explore the complex interplay between natural and artificial light. The afternoon light streaming through his studio window has shifted since morning, creating different shadows and highlighting details he hadn't noticed earlier. Thomas appreciates these changes, finding that the evolving quality of natural light keeps him constantly aware of the visual world around him. This sensitivity to light and its effects has made him a better lighthouse keeper as well as a better artist, helping him understand the subtle variations in visibility and weather conditions that affect maritime navigation. As he begins sketching the second Christmas card design, Thomas hears the distant sound of church bells from the town below, marking the noon hour on this Christmas Eve day. The bells remind him that while he maintains his solitary vigil at the lighthouse, the rest of the town is engaged in their own Christmas preparations. Children are probably helping their parents with last-minute gift wrapping, while families prepare special meals for tomorrow's celebrations. Thomas feels connected to these activities, even from his isolated position, knowing that his work contributes to the safety and well-being of the entire community. The second watercolor painting begins with a warm wash of orange and yellow across the sky, establishing the golden light of sunset. Thomas has observed thousands of sunsets from the lighthouse, and he's learned that no two are exactly alike. Tonight's sunset will be unique, influenced by atmospheric conditions, cloud formations, and countless other variables. But his paintings capture not just specific sunsets, but the essential quality of sunset light in this particular place, the way it transforms familiar scenes into something magical and transcendent. The fishing boats returning to harbor require careful attention to scale and perspective, as they must appear small enough to emphasize the lighthouse's commanding position while remaining detailed enough to suggest the human activity they represent. Thomas paints each boat as a simple silhouette against the bright water, using dark blue-gray mixed with just a touch of purple. The boat's reflections in the harbor water are painted with broken, horizontal brush strokes that capture the way reflected light shimmers and dances on moving water. Working on these Christmas cards connects Thomas to a tradition of lighthouse keepers who found ways to contribute to their communities beyond their official duties. His grandfather, who kept this same lighthouse for 35 years, was known throughout the town for his skill at repairing fishing nets and small boat engines. His father earned recognition for his weather forecasting abilities, helping local fishermen plan their trips around dangerous storms. Thomas has found his own way to serve the community through his art, creating small gifts that carry both beauty and meaning. The painting progresses through the afternoon, with Thomas adding layers of detail that bring the scene to life. Seagulls wheeling around the lighthouse are suggested with just a few confident brushstrokes, their forms simplified but instantly recognizable. The lighthouse beam itself requires special attention, as Thomas wants to capture the way it cuts through the gathering dusk, creating a visible column of light in the humid coastal air. He achieves this effect by leaving the paper white in a precise wedge shape, then painting around it with increasingly dark tones. As the winter afternoon begins to fade toward evening, Thomas completes the second Christmas card and sets it aside to dry. The natural light in his studio is becoming too dim for detailed painting work, but rather than turn on electric lights, he decides to take a break from art and begin preparing for the evening's lighthouse duties. Christmas Eve will bring increased boat traffic as fishing vessels hurry to return before the holiday, and Thomas wants to ensure that all systems are operating perfectly for the busy period ahead. As our gentle Christmas stories draw to their peaceful close, I hope you've found yourself carried away to these quiet places where time moves slowly and every detail whispers of comfort and home. We've walked with Eleanor through her snow-dusted village, shared Margaret's warm farmhouse kitchen filled with the promise of tomorrow's baking, and stood with Thomas in his lighthouse tower, watching over the harbor's gentle rhythms. These are the moments that make Christmas truly magical, not grand gestures or elaborate celebrations, but the simple acts of care, creation, and quiet preparation that fill ordinary days with extraordinary meaning. Let these stories settle around you now like the softest blanket, carrying you into the most restful sleep. Sweet dreams, and thank you for sharing this peaceful Christmas Eve with me.